now to that deadly shooting at an Idaho mall. 2 people were killed and at least 4 others injured after a gunman opened fire. Officials say the shooter is in custody and in critical condition. And meanwhile, witnesses, many were simply shopping or walking in the mall at that time, they're sharing what they experienced. Take a listen.
Me and my fiance were in there shopping. We went to the pretzel stand to get some pretzels, and all of a sudden we heard gunshots.
As we went by JCPenney's, people started coming around a corner, and I asked somebody, "Why are you running?" And he said somebody heard a gunshot. The next person I saw coming through was a lady with a stroller, and she said that there was an active shooter in the mall.
We just came out of JCPenney. We were kind of by the pretzel shop, just wandering around, and then we just heard pop, 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 pop. It did take a second. We kind of looked at each other like, you know, did we just hear that?
Yeah, so out of place.
Yeah, and then, I mean, we just turned around and started running. I had him in the stroller, and we kind of just turned around and started running, and then we were just yelling at everybody we could that there was a shooter, and made our way back into JCPenney's and just ran out the back door into the parking lot. It could have been us, and we definitely feel for those people and their families.
I didn't see the gun. I didn't see the person holding the gun, but I could feel that like everybody else was pretty panicky, people like running out. And then I saw other people that I saw earlier like freaking out like outside, and I was like, oh, this is a real, this happened. This is a real event.
A mundane Monday afternoon turned life-threatening. It echoes countless other recent shootings in America. Just a month ago in Tennessee, a gunman opened fire at a Kroger grocery store, killing 1 and wounding more than a dozen people. Earlier this year, at a King Soopers supermarket in Colorado, 10 people were senselessly killed. With that, we turn to a new ABC News series. We're calling it Rethinking Gun Violence. Let's get some fresh ideas here where we're going to examine the level of gun violence in the United States, which shocks people around the world. I lived overseas for 5 years. They just can't believe what they see that happens in America all the time. We're going to try and figure out what can be done about it. And so joining us today to discuss this, a senior science reporter at FiveThirtyEight, Maggie Koerth, and Debbie Mucarsel-Powell. She's a senior advisor at the advocacy group Giffords.org. She's also a former congresswoman from the state of Florida. So thank you both for being with us. We are trying to jumpstart this conversation once again. So Maggie, let me begin with you. Dive into some of the research around mass shootings. What can you tell us about how mass shootings fit into the broader picture of the gun violence in this country?
Well, so when we have looked at gun violence in the United States at FiveThirtyEight, we have kind of chosen not to focus on mass shootings as much because mass shootings don't make up the majority of gun violence that happens in this country. 2/3 of all gun deaths in the United States are suicides, was one of the findings that we came up with when we did our series on gun violence in America about 5 years ago. And that's something that's held true across the years. And I think this is really important to know because if you're paying attention to like where the bulk of gun deaths are coming from, that's going to change what your solutions are. It's going to change what policies you end up proposing, and it's going to change who you're trying to reach out to.
And Debbie, I know that this fight for you is personal. Tell us what drew you into this type of work.
Yes, you know, I lost my father to gun violence when I was 24 years old, and it's something that really has marked my life. I missed him when I got married, never got to meet my grandkids, and it's a story that now I share with millions of Americans. And we have seen time and time again that our government has done nothing. It's one of the reasons why I decided to run back in 2018. I got elected, and we were able to pass the first piece of legislation, the Universal Background Check Bill, for the first time in over 20 years. But unfortunately, it got stalled in the Senate. The House of Representatives has done the same thing once again this year, and it's stuck in the Senate. And if we want to build trust in our government, we need to see that our government works for the people. This is an issue that really brings Republicans, Democrats, Independents together most Americans, over 90%, agree that something has to be done. We cannot continue to normalize what is happening in our country. Every day there's a shooting, and like Maggie was saying, it's not just mass shootings. We are losing people to suicide. We are losing kids to drive-by shootings through community violence. There's a lot that we can do, but it has to start with our government and passing these laws that will reduce these type of mass shootings that we're seeing everywhere in our nation.
And Maggie, as Debbie points out, we all get this. Americans get it. Whatever their position is on the Second Amendment and gun rights, people know this is a shame and a disgrace in our country and a tragedy for individual families. So what does research tell us would work to get us out of this? Are there potential solutions that data shows, can work?
So one of the things that I think is really important that has kind of come up in the data is that we know that more guns is correlated with more gun violence, that having a gun in the home makes you more likely to be a victim of gun violence. And the reason that is true, like people often talk about this as though it is like something where your gun is going to be taken away from you and used against you. But I think this is really where that knowledge that suicide makes up the bulk of gun deaths in America really starts to matter, because what having a gun in the home increases your likelihood of dying by gun violence really means is that it increases your likelihood of gun death by suicide. That is a huge part of where that correlation comes from. Domestic violence is another huge part of where that correlation comes from. I think that one of the things that we came away with from looking at the data is that we have to stop thinking about gun violence as something that only happens from a bad guy with a gun, that it can be, people whose pain has turned in on themselves, people whose, conflicts have turned outwards against the ones that they love.
That enters to a whole nother discussion where we really need to spend more time, money, and resources into mental health in this country. It's not just the guns, but it's what's going on in people's minds. And Debbie, you talk about the reason why you got involved is it's personal for you, and that's why you decided to run for Congress. When these shootings happen, we always enter that same debate, right? The gun debate. And what's Congress going to do about this? What's our government going to do about this? You served in Congress. You mentioned that. So what can be done differently on behalf of our government to address this? And what's stopping those efforts?
Look, unfortunately, there has been so much influence by the NRA and the gun lobby, and that's why you've seen the Senate stall on this issue. That's why we saw David Chipman, who was not able to be confirmed to be the director of the ATF. That's an agency that has not had a director for over 20 years now. So one of the things that we need to do is make sure that we take money out of politics. The gun lobby has too much influence with our senators and our elected officials. We have to make sure that people like myself that represent a Latino community get engaged in the political system. I can tell you that as a Latina, one of the data points that we've seen here is that we are twice as likely to be affected by gun violence than other non-Latino white Americans. And we have right now in the state of Florida, a Hispanic senator, Senator Marco Rubio, who has turned his back in our community. Why? Because of the influence of the gun lobby. So I think it's incredibly important to get engagement from the voters so that they know that if those elected officials are not going to act, then we need to bring out our votes and elect people that will. I think that it's also very frustrating that we have allowed a stall in the Senate because of the filibuster. If they can't pass a bill that 90% of Americans support, then we need to really question whether that procedure works for the majority of Americans. So I think that there are a lot of things that we can do. One thing that gives me optimism is that President Biden has included $5 billion in the reconciliation bill to invest in community intervention programs, community violence intervention programs, and that's something that's very much needed, especially here in the state of Florida.
Debbie Mucarsel-Powell and Maggie Koerth, appreciate your time, both of you, today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And for more in-depth coverage on gun violence, including a real-time tracker for gun violence casualties, head to abcnews.com/gunviolence as we continue our special series, Rethinking Gun Violence in America.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.